The brief asked us to find a site in Marylebone and Fitzrovia and identify its voice. Not just what this building is, but what does it say? And how can interior architecture respond to the voice? I walked through Marylebone and Fitzrovia looking for a site. On Chilton Street, I noticed a word dispensary. That led me to a small building beside it. I researched its history and found its link to care and the local community. This became my site. At this point, I was not thinking about Benin or restitution. I was only trying to understand the building's voice. At first, I thought the voice was light. The building is overshadowed, so I explored how light could be introduced or amplified. But later, I realized the stronger voice was care. Not just healthcare, but care as care for people, care for memory, care for marginalized histories. I also reflected on my own position as an international student. I asked, what makes a place feel welcoming when it is not originally yours? This led me to a wider issue: the restitution of cultural artifacts. This is where the Benin Bronzes became central. They are objects taken from the Kingdom of Benin in Nigeria during the 1897 British invasion and now held in museums worldwide. This created a link between care, cultural memory, and absence. I then asked, how can interior architecture respond to restitution? Architecture cannot decide where objects belong, but it can reveal, educate, connect people to absence. Even when objects are missing, the questions remain: how do we relate to what is no longer there? This led me to replication. Museums already use replicas to show absent objects, but I did not want a replica to replace the original. I wanted it to show absence, not hide it. So replication became a way to preserve memory, support the debate about restitution, keep the conversation active, not replacing the original, but pointing to its absence. I started modeling the building to understand the space. Then I created digital replicas of Benin Bronzes using photogrammetry. The results showed strong detail and texture. This made me ask not just what the object looks like, but how it is made. I explored the lost wax casting process and experimented with it with wax, but the result did not work as intended. So I moved away from representation and focused on experience. I 3D printed a replica of an artifact. It failed several times. When I fixed it by enabling the support, the printer produced root-like structures under the object. They were meant to support the print, but it became more interesting than the object itself. They were literally holding it up. This became the idea of roots. Roots became a way to connect with everything. A root connects, supports, grows. It links what is visible to what is hidden. This relates directly to restitution. Objects are dispersed but still connected to their origin. So roots becomes both a structural system, a cultural idea. I developed them into root-like plinths for the artifacts. Then I asked, can roots support more than the objects? Can they also support the building? I tested them as architectural elements. At first, the design became too heavy and crowded. The space lost clarity. I returned to the idea of care. Care should not feel heavy. It should feel light, open, and simple. So I reduced the system and refined the roots. They still support and connect, but lightly. I then focused on how people experience space. I used proxemics to study distance and interaction. The aim was to let visitors move around the objects, pause, approach closely, or stay distant. I also used a field experiment of 3D printing the whole building. Although the printing failed, the support structure created root-like positions. I used this as a guide for placing the plinths. Then I adjusted them for circulation and spatial balance. The plinths became more than display elements. They became part of the architecture. This shifted the project into adaptive reuse. I began working with the existing building. What stays, what changes, what is added. The roots became a system that supports objects, shapes spaces, begins to support the building itself. The project started with one word: dispensary. That led to the building's history. The history led to care. Care led to the cultural memory and marginalized histories. This led to my own experience as an international student, which led to the restitution of the Benin Bronzes. From there, replication became my method, failure became my material investigation, support became roots, roots became architecture, and now Ibile. In the end, the project is a conversation between care, memory, absence, restitution, and connection. The replicas are not the originals. They point to what is missing, and the roots connect what is present to what is absent. 1 minute.